When my wife, Clara, found out that I had willingly given the multi-million-dollar project to her favorite assistant, she seemed to believe her 3-month-long cold shoulder treatment had finally broken me. A wide smile spread across her face, and she cheerfully proposed we finally take that honeymoon to Iceland we had postponed so many times. But when the assistant, Simon, learned of our plans, he grew possessive and threw a fit, even threatening to leave the company entirely. Clara, who had always indulged him, immediately went into a panic. After spending 3 days and nights calming him down, she told me the honeymoon was off again, using a last-minute business trip as the excuse. She then gave my ticket to him. Later, she explained it to me with a casual air, as if it were the most logical thing in the world. She said that romantic feelings were secondary and that work had to be the top priority for both of us. As the CEO, she had to lead by example, and as her husband, I was expected to understand. "You're my husband, Leo," she said. "You should get it, right?" I glanced down at my phone, where Simon had just posted a new picture. A photo of the two of them in Iceland, their heads pressed together, their hands forming a heart against the backdrop of a waterfall. I didn't say a word. I just nodded. Clara took my silence as a sign of newfound maturity and generosity. She was pleased with herself, promising to make it up to me with an even better honeymoon when she returned. What she didn't know was that I had already tendered my resignation. And she had, without realizing it, already signed the divorce papers. For us, there was no future left. The day after Clara and her young assistant left for their business trip, which was really our honeymoon, I finalized all of my work handovers and completed the resignation process with the Human Resources Department. It took less than 10 minutes for a notification to pop up on my computer screen. Resignation approved, Clara. The quiet chatter from the nearby cubicles reached my ears. "Looks like the CEO has been wanting to get rid of him for a while," someone whispered. "At least he had the sense to leave on his own." Another voice chimed in. "Yeah, staying here would just make things awkward for everyone, especially her. It's better he left." I overheard them speculating about my future, the consensus being that as Clara's husband, I probably had enough money to never work again. As I packed the few personal items from my desk into a cardboard box, I could feel the eyes of my co-workers on me, their expressions a mixture of mockery and jealousy. I had grown accustomed to it. Everyone in the office was aware that Simon and I did not get along. And despite being married to the CEO, I was the one Clara consistently chose to humiliate in public to appease him. This dynamic had encouraged everyone else to make my work life difficult, a transparent attempt to curry favor with her prized employee. A cold, humorless laugh escaped my lips. I was sorry to be the one to disappoint their narrative, but I was simply moving on to a better opportunity. A competing firm had offered me a position with double the salary and significantly better benefits. I didn't give them the satisfaction of a backward glance as I carried my box out of the office, their envious and twisted faces the last thing I wanted to see. Just as I stepped out of the building and into the afternoon sun, my phone rang. It was Clara. I briefly wondered how I was going to explain my resignation, but her voice cut through my thoughts before I could speak. "I've just emailed you a document," she said, her tone all business. "I need you to get it done and send it back to me within the hour." It was clear she had no idea that I had quit. I couldn't help but chuckle as I opened the file on my phone. It was the very same project I had just been forced to hand over to Simon. This was our usual routine. Simon would be credited with the success and receive the public praise, while I did the actual work behind the scenes. If anything went wrong, the blame would fall squarely on my shoulders. Initially, I had fought against this arrangement, but Clara had a way of persuading me, and when that failed, she would resort to the silent treatment, staying up all night to work on the project herself, looking exhausted and overwhelmed. I could never stand to see her struggle, so I would always give in. I held on to the belief that eventually she would see how much I cared for her and what I was willing to do. That belief shattered during our last major fight. She had battled with me for 3 full months to get Simon a promotion, freezing me out completely. During that time, I was hospitalized with a fever of 104 degrees Fahrenheit, and she never once came to visit. Not a single call. Her silence was a weapon, wielded to force me into relinquishing a major project I had poured a month of my life into. That was the moment I finally gave up. "I'm not in the office," I replied calmly into the phone. "Not in the office?" Clara's voice instantly turned sharp and cold. "Leo, I believe it's still working hours. If you're absent without permission, company policy dictates that's a full day's pay docked." "I'm aware," I said, "but I've already—" Before I could tell her I had resigned, I heard Simon's soft voice in the background. "Clara, if Leo doesn't want to do it, don't make him. I can handle it." "No." Clara's tone immediately softened, becoming gentle and affectionate in a way she never used with me anymore. "You worked too hard yesterday. You need to get some rest today." Simon protested that he wasn't tired, but Clara cut him off, her tone firm but playful. "I'm the boss here. When I tell you to rest, that's an order. Are you going to disobey me?" I could almost hear Simon's playful pout. "I just think it's too much for Leo," he said. "As if he has it harder than you," Clara scoffed. "You're traveling for the company and still managing contracts, while he just sits around the office. Besides, he's my husband. Isn't it his job to work hard for me?" With that one sentence, she erased years of my contributions. I no longer felt anger or heartbreak, just a profound and hollow numbness. This wasn't the first time, after all. Seeing my silence, Clara must have assumed I had conceded, because her tone softened. "Leo, do you really think all I'm giving you is work? I'm trying to train you. As my husband, you should have more ambition and drive. You should take a lesson from Simon. He was up working until 4 in the morning yesterday. I've never met someone so talented and hardworking at such a young age." Simon laughed on the other end of the line. "I think Leo is great too," he said, but his voice was laced with a condescension so thick you could cut it with a knife. Clara, oblivious, just scoffed lightly. "If he were half as capable as you, I'd be smiling in my sleep. Don't forget, you're the one who handled all the major projects this year." They were perfectly in sync, a well-rehearsed duo. I remained quiet, feeling no desire to argue a point she would never accept. The truth was, all the projects from that year were ones Simon had taken directly from me, with her full knowledge and approval. She likely believed that after 5 years of marriage, I would never leave her over something she considered so trivial. "Anyway," she said, her voice brisk again, "Simon and I have an event to attend later. Finish the file and send it over soon." She hung up before I could utter another word. Not even 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed twice. It was a notification from a social media app. Simon had posted a new update. The picture showed the two of them at a lavish, candle-lit dinner. Clara was leaning her head on his shoulder, looking coy, and on the table in front of Simon was a small, elegant gift box, the perfect size for a ring. I scrolled down and saw another post from the previous night. At 4 in the morning, they were at a lively bar, laughing with drinks in their hands. So this was the hard work Clara had been talking about. And the event they had to attend was just another one of their dates. I let out a quiet, tired laugh. There was no point in confronting her anymore. She always had a ready-made excuse. Even on the rare occasions I managed to leave her speechless, it was never followed by an apology or any genuine remorse, only by another long, punishing silence that I was always expected to break. Looking back, I realized all the energy I had spent trying to fix our relationship would have been better spent on making more money. Love, I had learned, can fade and betray you. Money, on the other hand, is always loyal. With that final thought solidifying in my mind, I walked away from the company for good, my mind already charting a new course. As I pulled my car out of the parking garage, my phone buzzed again. A payment notification. Clara had just spent another $20,000 on my credit card. Everyone assumed that I was with Clara for her money, but the reality was the complete opposite. All of my bank cards were in her possession. She claimed her own funds were tied up in company investments, so for years, all of our shared living expenses were paid for out of my salary and the income from my freelance work on the side. I had always believed that a man should be the primary contributor to the household, so I never questioned the arrangement. It wasn't until recently that I realized that despite earning a significant income, I had absolutely no savings. In fact, I was perpetually short on cash. Unable to ignore it any longer, I finally went through my credit card statements. That's when I discovered that Clara frequently used my card to buy expensive gifts for Simon. There were gaming consoles worth thousands, designer suits that cost more than $10,000, and once she even booked out an entire 5-star hotel to throw him a birthday party, a celebration that cost over $100,000. And for me, she couldn't even be bothered to buy me a new set of underwear when my old ones were falling apart. If I ever pointed out a gift for myself that cost more than $100, she would complain that it was an unnecessary expense, and hand me a handwritten card instead, lecturing me about the importance of saving for our future. I finally reached my breaking point and confronted her. Her face went cold, and she accused me of not trusting her. That confrontation led to another round of the silent treatment, and she swore she would never spend another cent of my money. Thinking about that promise now, I still dialed her number. I called over 10 times with no answer. Without any more hesitation, I drove straight to the nearest bank and had the card frozen. Less than a minute after I left the bank, my phone rang. It was Clara. "Sorry," she began, her voice feigning innocence. "I was busy and didn't see your calls. What's going on?" "Nothing," I replied calmly. "It's already been taken care of." "Oh," she said, pausing for a moment. "By the way, there seems to be an issue with your card. The payment was declined." She said it casually, as if it were a minor inconvenience. "I know," I said plainly. "I froze it." "Why on earth would you do that for no reason?" she snapped, her voice rising. "Did you have nothing better to do?" "Let's just say I did," I replied. "But didn't you promise you wouldn't use my card anymore anyway?" Clara was silent on the other end of the line. I had never been difficult about money with her. When her company was just starting out, I fell seriously ill and needed a surgery that cost $100,000. She had secretly invested all of our savings into a risky venture and lost every penny. She came to me in tears, expecting me to be furious. Instead, I comforted her, telling her that money wasn't important and that my income was hers to use as she saw fit. I thought that by giving her my complete trust and support, our bond would grow stronger. I never imagined it would only make her feel more entitled. After a few seconds of silence, she sighed dramatically. "All right, I understand. You're still upset that I couldn't go on the honeymoon with you, so now you're being petty. Leo, I really thought you had grown up, but you're still so childish." "Fine. I promise, after this trip, I'll drop everything and we'll go on that honeymoon, okay?" She continued, her voice demanding. "I didn't bring any of my cards with me this time. Just go unfreeze yours and stop making things difficult. Tonight's event is very important. You have 10 minutes, or I'm going to be genuinely angry." She hung up after delivering her threat, as if she was afraid I might refuse. In the past, whenever she threatened to be angry, I would immediately do whatever she wanted. It wasn't because I was afraid of her anger, but because I knew how hard she worked, and I didn't want to add to her stress. Only now did I realize that no matter how much I tried to ease her burdens, the problems she complained about were almost always of her own making, so why should I continue to clean up her messes? "If you didn't bring your card, you can ask your secretary," I texted back. "Or you can ask Simon. This business trip is for his project after all. It doesn't seem unreasonable for him to cover the expenses." After sending the message, I turned off my phone, got into my car, and drove to the apartment we shared to pack my things. I had paid for the apartment in full, a layout and location she had picked out. At the time, I had considered putting both of our names on the deed, but some gut feeling held me back, so it was in my name alone. Looking back, I was grateful that I had unknowingly left myself an escape route. After I finished packing my belongings, I listed the apartment with a real estate agent. The following day, I went to the Civil Affairs Bureau and submitted the divorce agreement we had both signed. I remember when she signed it, I was still wondering how to bring up the subject. But she had been in such a rush to grab her luggage and meet Simon downstairs that she didn't even look at the document. She just flipped to the final page and scribbled her name. "You should at least read it," I had said, a final, faint glimmer of hope still flickering within me. "There's no need," she'd replied dismissively. "You're my husband. Why wouldn't I trust you?" A bitter smile had touched my lips. She trusted Simon far more than she ever trusted me. Her so-called trust was just an excuse to brush me aside, her mind already on the flight and the time she would spend with him. In a way, her haste saved me the trouble of a difficult conversation. However, when I submitted the paperwork, the clerk informed me that they still required a personal confirmation from both parties acknowledging an emotional breakdown before the divorce could be processed. I showed the clerk the photos of Clara and Simon's overly affectionate posts, then a picture of our wedding photo, which she had smashed during a fit of rage over something related to him. The clerk still shook his head. "We need to hear it from her directly," he insisted. "There are no exceptions." Frustrated, I had no choice but to turn my phone back on. The moment it powered up, it was flooded with dozens of missed calls and unread messages from Clara. Because I hadn't unfrozen the credit card, her messages had escalated from coaxing to threatening, culminating in a furious rant. The very last message was her cursing at me and declaring that she wanted a divorce. I showed the text messages to the clerk. He still shook his head. Left with no other option, I called her. It rang for a long time before she finally answered. "Clara, about our relationship." "What relationship?" She cut me off coldly, her voice dripping with disdain. "I don't want to hear another word from you. I'm divorcing you, and that's final." She hung up, clearly assuming I was calling to apologize and try to patch things up again. The clerk, finally convinced, looked at me with an expression of sympathy and submitted the documents. He informed me that the divorce certificate would be ready in a month. I knew Clara didn't actually mean it when she threatened divorce. It was her ultimate weapon, a line she pulled whenever she was angry with me, knowing it was the one thing I feared. And every single time, I had caved. I would apologize, concede to her demands, and beg her not to leave. She used my fear of divorce to control me, thinking it would always work. But she had forgotten a fundamental truth. Love is like a bank account. You can't make withdrawals forever without making any deposits. Eventually, the account runs dry. Because I had listed the apartment for a competitive price, it sold within a week. I went to the real estate office to sign the contract and confirm the handover date with the new buyer, and then I returned home. The moment I opened the front door, I was met with the sound of cheerful laughter from inside. The pair of matching slippers we shared was gone from the entryway. In their place was a pair of expensive men's leather shoes and the high heels Clara treasured. A birthday gift from Simon. It hit me then. The people inside were Clara and Simon. Weren't they supposed to be back in 2 days? As I stood there trying to process this, Simon walked out from the living room, having heard the door open. He was wearing my slippers and my bathrobe, strolling around the apartment as if he owned it. "Leo," he said, feigning surprise. "What are you doing back so early? I didn't think your company let out at this time." As he spoke, he casually flicked cigarette ash into a nearby glass. It was one of the matching mugs Clara had given me years ago, a gift I used to cherish and handle with care. At that moment, Clara emerged from the living room. She saw Simon using my mug as an ashtray and simply pretended not to notice. This was the same woman who used to complain about the faintest smell of smoke and had forced me to quit smoking years ago. Now she didn't show the slightest sign of discomfort. It was clear how much she had changed for him. When she saw me standing there, her expression was complicated for a brief moment before it hardened into a familiar coldness. "Skipping work again, Leo? Just because you're my husband doesn't give you a free pass to do whatever you want. This is a company, not our home. If you don't adhere to the rules, how can I expect anyone else to—" Rules. I almost laughed out loud. If anyone had a history of flouting the rules, it was her. A year ago, just as the company had found its footing, she had bypassed all established protocols to parachute Simon, who had absolutely no relevant experience, directly into a management role. I had expressed my concerns, but she assured me he had great potential. I decided to trust her judgment and personally mentored him. But Simon did nothing but play games on his phone and nap at his desk. He would coast through the workday and then stay late into the evening, posting pictures in the company group chat to create the illusion of being a dedicated employee. I reported all of this to Clara. She just shrugged, suggesting he was probably just unwinding after a stressful day. When I asked her to monitor his performance, she claimed she was too busy. When I suggested installing security cameras, she said it would be an invasion of privacy. Project after project failed under his leadership, costing the company millions. Yet Simon faced no consequences. When I finally had enough and attempted to fire him, Clara fought me tooth and nail. "Are you just jealous?" she had asked me, her voice sharp. "Are you afraid that he's too talented and might overshadow you?" So Simon stayed, and one by one, he poached my clients and took over my projects. Clara saw everything that was happening, but she chose to turn a blind eye, continuing to praise him as a star employee, while painting me as petty and insecure. Back then, I felt a deep sense of injustice. Now, looking back, I realized that if I had been given that much leeway at any other company, I would have been a massive success instead of a cautionary tale. I said nothing in response to her accusation. Simon gently patted Clara's back, speaking to her in a soft, soothing voice. "Maybe Leo rushed home because he heard you were back in the country." Clara seemed to find this explanation plausible, and her expression brightened with a touch of pride. "Fine," she said. "Just don't let it happen again. But how did you know I was back today?" Simon smiled. "Clara, you forgot. HR handles all the flight bookings. Maybe someone there told Leo—" Clara snorted. "You always have time for office gossip, don't you, Leo? You should try focusing that energy on your actual work for a change. And don't think for a second that I'm going to forgive you just because you came running home. You freezing that card made me look like an absolute fool in front of our business partners. In the end, it was Simon who had to go around and borrow money to settle the bill." Seeing that I remained silent, she must have assumed I was reflecting on my actions, as I always did. Her tone softened just a fraction. "It's not that I can't forgive you," she began. "But first, we need to properly compensate Simon for all the trouble you've caused. The apartment he's renting is currently being renovated, so it's unlivable. I need you to clear out the spare bedroom and let him stay here for a while. If you do that, I'll consider us even." I just shook my head. This apartment has already been sold. Sold? Clara's eyes widened in disbelief. Before she could question me further, Simon chimed in smoothly. "Leo probably sold it so he could buy you a bigger, better place to make it up to you, right?" Clara found this explanation entirely convincing, and a smile spread across her face. "That actually sounds about right. We have been living here for a while. It is time for an upgrade. I'll even contribute to the new place. So don't finalize the sale on this one just yet. Simon can stay here in the meantime." "Oh no, that's too much," Simon protested with false modesty. "I should at least pay rent. Market price." "Rent?" Clara's expression darkened. "I'm your boss. I won't hear of you paying rent." "Still, it doesn't feel right." "No, I insist." "Fine, then just a few hundred or something." The two of them went back and forth, their exchange feeling like a poorly rehearsed play. Clara put on a show of magnanimity, acting as if the rent for an apartment that would easily go for nearly $10,000 a month was a trivial matter. It was a stark contrast to when we were dating, when she would insist on splitting every single bill down to the last cent. The difference between how she treated someone she cared for and someone she didn't was truly staggering. "So," she said, turning back to me, "if you agree to this, I might reconsider the divorce." "There's no need to reconsider." "What?" she interrupted, assuming I was about to beg for her forgiveness again. "You think I'd let you off the hook that easily? If I don't teach you a lesson this time, how will I know you won't mess up again?" Simon chuckled beside her. "Clara does have a point. But come on, for my sake, maybe you can let Leo off the hook this one time. Besides, you two have been married for so many years. It would be a shame to throw it all away over something like this." Clara pretended to think it over seriously, while Simon gently tugged on her arm, coaxing her like a petulant child. "Stop it," she said, but she was smiling. "All right then," she finally declared, turning to me with a pleased look on her face. "Since Simon has spoken up for you, I'll forgive you. You should really be thanking him. After everything you've done to him, he's still willing to put in a good word for you. So, about the divorce." "You misunderstood," I interrupted her flatly, holding out the folded divorce agreement. "What I meant was, we're already divorced." Clara's smile froze on her face. "What are you talking about? You want to divorce me?" Her expression wasn't one of joy, as I might have once imagined, but one of shock, mixed with a flicker of anger. Simon, for his part, was momentarily stunned before a flash of delight crossed his face, which he quickly masked with a look of concern. "Leo, why are you being so stubborn?" he said, his tone feigning reproach. "Clara only mentioned divorce earlier because she was angry and wanted you to comfort her. She didn't really mean it. You should take that agreement back and stop being ridiculous. She's worked so hard and just got back into the country. The last thing she needs is more stress." He framed his words as if he were on my side, but I knew his true intention was to provoke Clara. It was a tactic he'd used successfully many times before, often resulting in her punishing me in some way to prove a point. I braced myself for her to impulsively agree to the divorce out of spite. To my surprise, she remained silent and composed, her face unreadable. After a long, tense pause, she finally spoke, her voice firm. "I'm not going to divorce you." She looked at me seriously. "Leo, there are too many shared interests between us now." Hearing that, I finally understood her hesitation. It wasn't about our marriage. It was about the division of assets. It seemed she had conveniently forgotten the prenuptial agreement she had insisted on before we married. The agreement clearly stipulated that in the event of a divorce, I would not be entitled to a single cent of her wealth. Likewise, she had no claim to any of my premarital assets, which included the apartment we were standing in. I cut her off and reminded her of that arrangement. "And perhaps you misunderstood me," I added. "I didn't mean that I want a divorce. I meant that we are already divorced. You signed the agreement weeks ago." Clara stared at me, her mind clearly racing, before she denied it. "That's impossible. I have no memory of signing anything like that." Seeing her continued denial, I unfolded the document and showed her the last page. Her signature was scrawled at the bottom, messy and hurried, but undeniably hers. The sight of it seemed to jog her memory, and the color slowly drained from her face. "The papers you gave me before we left, those were divorce papers?" she whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. I simply nodded, watching as her expression shifted from shock to something darker. I couldn't understand why she was so against it now, after she had been the one to constantly hold the threat of divorce over my head. Time seemed to stretch on in the silent room. I half expected her to seize the opportunity and just go along with it, but after a few moments, she suddenly snatched the papers from my hand and violently tore them into shreds. "I am not divorcing you," she stated, her voice shaking with emotion. Her reaction was puzzling and honestly a little amusing. "Tearing up the paper doesn't change anything," I said calmly. "The documents have already been processed by the Civil Affairs Bureau. The official certificate will be issued soon." Hearing that the divorce was nearly final, Simon's smile widened, though he tried to cover it with a look of feigned regret. "Ah, Leo, you're being so impulsive," he sighed. "Seeing you do this, I really feel for Clara. If I had a girlfriend as wonderful as her, I would never dream of a divorce." "Shut up," Clara snapped, cutting him off with a harshness I had never heard her use with him before. He froze, his face a mask of pure shock, as if he couldn't believe she had just spoken to him that way. It was understandable. She had always treated him with a gentle reverence, careful never to upset him. Her sudden hostility was as surprising to me as it was to him. Realizing she might have gone too far, Clara seemed to compose herself, addressing Simon in a cooler, more detached tone. "This is a private matter between my husband and me. It is not your place to get involved. If you have nothing else to do, you should leave now." "But Clara," Simon whined, "have you forgotten? The apartment I'm renting isn't livable right now." "If it's not livable, then go to a hotel," she replied, her voice like ice. "You're a grown man. Don't tell me you can't solve a simple problem like this on your own. Or were you expecting me to magically produce an apartment for you?" Her tone was cold, but I saw her shoot him a quick, subtle glance. She probably thought she was being discreet, but I already knew she had secretly purchased a small house in the suburbs without telling me. Simon, it seemed, understood her signal perfectly. With a pouting, aggrieved expression, he quietly retrieved a key from the pocket of her coat, hanging by the door, and slipped out. I didn't expose their little scheme. I no longer cared enough to bother. Besides, revealing it would change nothing. The property was legally hers to do with as she pleased. After he was gone, Clara let out a long sigh. When she turned back to me, her voice had softened considerably. "Are you satisfied now? I know you never really wanted a divorce. You were just angry because you thought I was too close to Simon. But there was never anything romantic between us. I just felt sorry for him, being all alone in this city. As his boss, I felt a responsibility to help him out. I admit, my closeness to him might have provoked you, but we are the ones who are married. I was only trying to motivate you to become better." She smiled and stepped forward, her arms outstretched for a hug. I didn't hesitate to push her away. "The handover for this apartment is in 1 month," I said, my voice flat. "I plan to use that time to clean it properly. Since you're back now, you need to figure out how you're going to move your things." Her arms froze in mid-air, and the smile on her face stiffened. "Leo, what are you talking about? I've already told Simon to leave. I've said everything I can to explain. You still want to sell the house? You still want this divorce?" She looked at me as if she were the victim of a great injustice. She seemed to have forgotten the time during our Cold War when, in a desperate attempt to keep her from leaving, I had been forced to kneel before her in a public place. I said nothing, and she seemed to interpret my silence as hesitation. She sighed again. "Even if we do get divorced, have you thought about what comes next? I know I'm not perfect, but have you considered that your next partner might be even worse than me? What will you do then?" I almost laughed. In her mind, was everything, including love and marriage, just a business transaction, a matter of profit and loss? I could understand that mentality coming from a CEO, But if that was her logic, I couldn't for the life of me figure out what calculation made Simon a better choice than me. Still, I didn't say it out loud. There was no point in discussing it further. Just as I was about to tell her to leave, her phone rang. It was a call from the office. "President," a frantic voice said on the other end. "Our partner just called. They're saying there's a major problem with the project that Simon's team handled. They're furious and are demanding that we fix it immediately, or they're threatening to sue." "How is that possible?" Clara muttered, mostly to herself. Simon's proposals have always been solid. How could this one? Her voice trailed off as a look of dawning realization crossed her face. After giving a few vague instructions to the person on the phone to try and calm the client down, she hung up and looked at me. "Leo, didn't you review that proposal?" It seemed her memory was finally catching up with her. In the past, whenever she had taken a project from me and given it to Simon, I always felt a sense of unease. I would quietly go in and fix his sloppy, error-filled drafts, polishing them until they were presentable. But every time, Clara would laugh and tell me to stop meddling, insisting that Simon was perfectly capable of handling it on his own. And then, whenever a problem inevitably arose, she would turn around and blame me for not reviewing his work carefully enough, scolding me for missing obvious mistakes. So this time, I hadn't looked at it at all. She had said Simon could handle it, so I gave him the opportunity to do just that. "No," I said, shaking my head. "I didn't." Clara's brow furrowed, and she looked like she was about to explode. I spoke again before she could, my voice calm and even. "That was Simon's assignment, not mine. I had neither the authority nor the obligation to interfere." "But you're my husband." "So what?" I let out a cold laugh. "Because I'm your husband, I'm supposed to clean up every single one of your messes? I'm supposed to take your lectures, endure your silent punishments, and let everyone at the office mock me while you stand by and watch. I have tolerated you in this situation for years. I have done everything a husband should, but you, have you done anything that makes you worthy of being called a wife?" "How can you say that?" she shot back. "Oh? Was it when you were openly flirting with another man? Or was it when you conspired with him to steal my projects? Are those your examples of being a good wife?" My tone was sharp, a side of me she had never seen. She was momentarily stunned, unable to form a coherent reply. She bit her lip, looking as if she wanted to say something but was holding herself back. After several tense moments, she straightened her posture, adopting the authoritative demeanor she wore at the office. "I don't want to argue about these pointless things. Whether or not I've been a qualified wife is irrelevant right now. I am still your boss. This project is a company issue, and as an employee, you have a responsibility to deal with it. You will resolve this situation within 3 days. Otherwise..." She pulled out her phone and opened the company's management software, intending to forward me the project file. But after searching for my name for a full 2 minutes, she couldn't find me in the system. Her face darkened. Finally, she looked up at me, her eyes wide with confusion. "Where are you? Why can't I find you in the company database?" I couldn't help but laugh. "Did you forget? I already quit." "You were the one who approved it," I reminded her. "That's impossible," she insisted, her expression shifting from disbelief to outright panic. "I don't remember ever authorizing your resignation." She frantically began searching her email for the request. I watched her, feeling not a shred of surprise, only a detached sense of amusement. What could she possibly remember? Her mind was so consumed with Simon, worrying if he had a place to live, if he was eating well, if he was getting enough rest, that there was no room for anything or anyone else. She didn't remember approving my resignation. She didn't remember the pain she had caused me. She certainly didn't remember how hard I had fought to keep the very projects she so casually gave away. She wasn't panicking because I had left. She was panicking because there was no one left to clean up her mess. I knew that once this crisis was over, she would revert to her old ways, and the cycle would begin all over again. Finally, she found the record of the approved resignation. When she saw my name as the applicant, her eyes went wide and she stumbled back a step. "Who the hell approved this?" She cursed under her breath. "Don't they know you're my husband?" She flew into a rage and immediately called the office. The moment someone picked up, she unleashed a torrent of abuse. "Did you confirm this with me? Who gave you the authority to act on your own initiative?" The person on the other end tried to stammer a defense. "But, President, didn't you say—" "Say what? Did I say to fire him? He's my husband, don't you know that? What kind of idiot are you? Can't you even tell who your real boss is? Get out of my company. I never want to see your face again." After she finished her tirade, she turned back to me, her expression suddenly sweet and apologetic. "Leo, I had no idea they would treat you that way. Please, come back to the company." She was putting on a performance, acting as if she were defending my honor. But I knew the truth. If it weren't for her and Simon's subtle encouragement, no one at the office would have ever dared to treat me so poorly. They were the ones pulling the strings. Seeing that I didn't respond, she pulled out her phone again and started offering me a massive salary, trying to rehire me on the spot. I brushed her hand away. "You should focus on your current crisis," I said coolly. "I'm leaving. And don't forget to have your things moved out before the apartment handover next month. If there are any delays that incur a penalty fee, I will take you to court. And once legal issues start, it will inevitably affect your company's stability. Things will only get messier for you. For your own sake, I suggest we end this peacefully. We were married for 5 years, after all. I'd rather not make this any uglier than it has to be." With that, I turned and walked into the bedroom to finish packing my things without a backward glance. Perhaps my words had finally gotten through to her, because she didn't follow me. A few minutes later, I heard her footsteps fading away down the hall. I finished packing and moved everything into a new apartment I had just rented. After a couple of days of rest, I began my job search. The story I had told my coworkers about jumping ship had been a bluff. I had quit without another offer lined up. To my surprise, within 2 days of posting my resume online, I received an offer from a top firm with double my previous salary and benefits that were far beyond my expectations. I aced the interview, signed the contract, and started my new job immediately. In the meantime, the apartment handover went through without a hitch, and a large sum of money was deposited into my bank account. My life settled into a peaceful rhythm. There was no more internal conflict, no more constant stress. I no longer had to get angry watching my wife with another man. I no longer had to worry about my hard work being given away. After just a few weeks, I looked healthier and more relaxed than I had in years. Clara, on the other hand, was clearly not doing as well. After Simon revised the proposal 7 or 8 times to no avail, the client hadn't even lost their temper yet. But Simon did. The moment his final draft was rejected, he completely snapped, smashing his computer to pieces in front of the entire office. By that point, many of the company's key employees had already resigned, and Clara was struggling to keep the business afloat. Seeing Simon's childish outburst in the midst of a major crisis, she finally lost her composure and slapped him across the face. Infuriated, Simon stormed out of the company and refused to answer any of her calls. Clara then attempted to outsource the project, but the client discovered her plan. In the end, she had violated the terms of their contract and was taken to court. The day she received the court summons, she appeared at my new apartment. A thunderstorm was raging, and she stood outside in the pouring rain, sobbing and screaming apologies, begging me to give her another chance. She swore up and down that she would never make the same mistakes again. I simply pulled my curtains closed, put in my earplugs, and went to bed. I felt not even a flicker of sympathy. It was just one rainstorm for her, but for me, our 5-year marriage had been a long, unending downpour of her making. I assumed she would eventually give up and leave, but to my surprise, when the sun rose the next morning, she was still standing there. The rain had plastered her hair to her pale, ashen face. I had never seen her look so pathetic. I had no intention of speaking to her, but I had to leave for work. As expected, the moment I opened my front door, she rushed towards me, her eyes wide and pleading. "You don't need to look at me like that," I said, my voice cold and final. "I am not going to help you." "I know you're angry with me," she said, her voice hoarse. "I've had a lot of time to think this past night. I won't ask you to help me with the company anymore, but could you at least give us one last chance? Do you remember this?" As she spoke, she held out her hand. In the center of her palm rested a small, chipped diamond ring. I paused, my mind drifting back in time. Clara had loved me once. When we first got married, we were broke. Between the two of us, we couldn't scrape together 10,000 yuan. Other brides had wedding rings the size of small rocks, but the one I gave her was pitifully tiny. We had made a promise to each other on our wedding day, a promise to stick together no matter what hardships came our way. "You told me you would love me forever," she whispered, seeing the slight shift in my expression. Her eyes lit up with a fragile hope. "I never betrayed you, Leo. Simon and I were never what you thought. I only felt sorry for him, but I never had romantic feelings for him. What I did, it wasn't unforgivable. Please, give me one more chance. Will you?" I reached out and took the ring from her palm. But before the hope in her eyes could fully ignite, her expression turned to one of absolute horror. I held the ring up between us, showing her the inner band. What had once been a smooth, blank surface now had words engraved on it. 2 names, carefully etched. Clara and Simon. A soft, empty laugh escaped my lips. She opened her mouth, a desperate explanation forming on her lips, but I cut her off. "Maybe what you did wasn't unforgivable in your eyes," I said softly, "but your heart has already turned away from me. His name is woven into every part of our life now. It's in the way you subconsciously order the food he likes when we go out to eat. It's in the way you murmur his name in your sleep. If I were to forgive you, I would have to forgive every single one of those memories. I'd have to forgive the person I became, the one who broke down time and time again because of you two. And you would have to live with my suspicion and my doubt every single day. Ask yourself honestly, Clara, can you really live like that?" She said nothing. She just stood there, frozen, her eyes red and overflowing with tears. But I knew that deep down, she already had her answer. "This is where our story ends," I said quietly. Then, I turned and walked away. This time she didn't follow me, but behind me, I could hear the sound of her sobbing, raw, gut-wrenching cries of regret and despair. But it wasn't regret for the choices she had made. It was regret for having to face the consequences. Unsurprisingly, Clara lost the lawsuit. The client was awarded 3 times the original deposit in damages, totaling nearly 1,000,000 yuan. To cover the debt, she emptied her savings and sold everything of value she owned, but she still came up hundreds of thousands short. Left with no other option, she decided to sell the small house she had secretly bought. It was only then that she discovered the name on the property deed had been changed. It now belonged to Simon. When the news came out, no one was surprised. She had trusted him so completely that transferring ownership of a house seemed almost predictable. "Clara, you told me yourself that you were giving me this house," Simon said when she finally confronted him. He was lounging on the sofa, eating grapes. "So I had the deed transferred. What's the problem?" He was smug, thinking he had played her perfectly and left her powerless. But Clara just laughed coldly, turned around, and went straight to the police. By providing proof that she had paid for the property entirely on her own, she not only reclaimed the house, but also filed a lawsuit against Simon for fraud. Unfortunately, years of indulging him meant she lacked enough solid evidence to press for significant damages. In the end, Simon was only detained for 15 days. The moment he was released, still furious, he started a live stream and began airing all of Clara's dirty laundry. With his good looks and manipulative charm, he quickly went viral. Clara's reputation was destroyed. Her business partners abandoned her, and within a month, her company went bankrupt. At the very end, Clara arranged to meet with Simon one last time. No one knows exactly what they said to each other, but the meeting ended in a heated argument that culminated in both of them jumping into a river. Clara drowned. Simon was rescued, but the trauma apparently caused his mind to snap. He began wandering the streets, claiming to be a billionaire, his behavior erratic and sometimes violent. Eventually, he was committed to a psychiatric hospital. I heard the news around the time I received my second promotion at my new company. I had just bought a new home for myself, and I had a new girlfriend, someone who loved me for who I was, not for what I could do for her. One evening, as we were planning our own honeymoon, she leaned in and asked me, "What does a honeymoon really mean to you?" I thought about it for a moment. "To someone you love," I said, "it's priceless. To someone you don't, it's probably just an outrageous expense." "So how much is our honeymoon worth?" she asked, smiling. I smiled back. "I guess only time will tell." No matter how bruised my heart had been, I found that I still believed in the possibility of a pure and simple love.